Now we're going to talk about a concept that is absolutely critical to the understanding of biology in general and human anatomy and physiology in particular. And this concept is the concept of homeostasis. Homeostasis is defined as a state of dynamic equilibrium in the body with respect to its internal environment and functions. Now, what does that mean? Well, when you talk about an equilibrium is a situation where when you're trying to keep things the same. So, for example, if you have a glass of water and there's a hole in the bottom of the glass, so water's leaking out, and at the same time, there's water being poured into the glass, such that the speed with which the water is leaving the glass and the speed with which the water is entering the glass is the same, and the level of water in the glass remains the same, that glass is said to be in a state of equilibrium with respect to the water level. The fact that water is moving in and out of the glass means that it's a dynamic equilibrium. That is to say, a static equilibrium is one where the state is the same, but it's the same without any changes occurring. A dynamic equilibrium is a situation where the state is the same, but changes are occurring all the time. And so homeostasis in the body is a situation where, for example, the body temperature or the body blood pressure or whatever situation you want to talk about, it remains the same, but there's always chemicals and always nervous function and things happening all the time in order to keep it at its necessary level. So, and this has to do with the internal environment of the body as well as the internal functions of the body. And as you can see here, the goal of homeostasis is the maintenance of life. That is to say, life is very tenuous in terms of its ability to stay healthy, and it requires very tight controls on a lot of factors. And there are a lot of changes occurring outside and inside the body, and the homeostatic mechanisms occur in order to keep things the way they are, regardless of the outside stress or the inside stress. Well, let's look at this diagram just for a second. Basically, this is a very simplistic view where you have a stimulus that is detected by a sensor and then taken into the control center, which is the nervous system. And then this stimulus, whatever it happens to be, based on what the control center deems necessary to keep homeostasis as it were, then through another mechanism puts out a response to keep things as they are. Now, one of the most important parts is how the body or how the organism decides what it wants to keep things at, and that's called the set point. The set point is the ideal normal value of a variable that the homeostatic mechanisms are arranged in order to maintain the process around this normal value. So the variable, whatever it is, a set point is thought to be the standard for that value. So let's take body temperature. Everybody's heard of 98.6 as being normal, quote unquote, body temperature. So the body temperature set point is 98.6, and homeostatic mechanisms will function whether it's hot outside, cold outside, whether the person drinks something cold or hot, and it'll work through various mechanisms to keep the body temperature around this normal set point. Now, the factor that causes the physiologic variable to move away from its set point is known as a stress. So let's say we take someone and put them in a freezer. Well, the stress there is the cold atmosphere, the cold environment, And this will act on the body temperature and try to move it away from that set point of 98.6. And so if you look at this diagram, you see that in the normal situation, everything is cool and we're in homeostasis. And then a stress occurs, either an increase or a decrease in temperature. This is the stimulus. This is then detected in some way by a receptor, which goes to the control center and says, wait a minute, the set point is 98.6 and it's 93.4 or something like that. And then it begins to put out information to generate heat to an effector, which responds to this and pushes this imbalance back into the set point area. And this is how homeostatic mechanisms work. Now, in order for the homeostatic mechanisms to work, you have to have certain parts that are functioning. The first is, as I've alluded to a couple of times now, is called the control center. And the control center is the part of the body. It's usually either the central nervous system or the endocrine system, and both can work together in some situations, that receives the information from the receptors about the variable. It then looks at that information in relation to the set point and signals a particular response to the effector organs. The receptor is the part of the body that receives information regarding the variable and sends it to the control center for evaluation. This is a structure in the body that monitors the values of your body's variables. It monitors your temperature. There are receptors to monitor your blood pressure. There are receptors to monitor your blood oxygen level. There are receptors to monitor your carbon dioxide level. There are receptors to monitor various aspects of your body. And then there are effectors. An effector is a structure that can change the value of the variable in response to a signal from the control center. And so what you have here is an example. I'll show you. Here's the variable, and the set point is a certain blood pressure, okay? And the stress here is a hemorrhage or loss of blood volume. Now when this happens, when the blood volume is lost, the blood pressure goes down. And when the blood pressure goes down, this is detected in various ways. And once it's detected by the control center, once the receptor sends the information that the blood pressure is down to the control center, there are certain reactions that occur. And one is an increase. Well, it results in a decrease in cardiac function and coronary blood flow, etc. But then the response to this will be to increase the cardiac output, increase the ventricular function, and lead to an increase in the blood pressure. Now, homeostatic mechanisms can be one of two types. One is called a negative feedback loop. This is a control system where the receptors, it has the receptors, control center, and effectors, but it acts to reverse whatever the original stress is. So if the stress is cold, it will seek to warm the body up. If the stress is a lower blood pressure, it will seek to raise the blood pressure. If the stress is a low oxygen level, it will seek to raise the oxygen level. In all of these situations, the control system works together with the control center and effectors to revert or change the original stress back to normal. The other type is called a positive feedback system. In this situation, whatever the stress is, it's considered desirable and it will seek to augment that stress. Now, this is a lot less common. But what you see here are two examples of a negative feedback loop. In this case, it's the general loop. Over here is just the body temperature. Here's the temperatures going up. It senses the temperature going up and sends out sweat glands and increased perspiration to decrease the temperature. So you start out with a raise in temperature and you work to decrease the temperature. So that's a negative feedback loop. If, for example, there was some reason that you would want to raise the temperature, then it would work to increase the temperature even more. Then that, in that case, you would have an increase or a positive feedback. There are certain situations, none that come to my mind right away, but where the positive feedback loop is actually desirable. Most of the ones that we encounter in this course will be negative feedback situations.